A simple, insignificant ping from my phone. Sarah tagged you in a live video. First, I ignored it. I was in my home office, finishing a quarterly report. Then my phone buzzed again. And again. Curious, I picked it up. The moment I clicked on the link, my entire world shattered. The screen flickered to life. It was a typical influencer-style live stream. Sarah's best friend, Amber, was showing off the vibrant streets of Bangkok. Bustling markets, neon signs, exotic food stalls. Sarah was supposed to be helping Amber start a business, right? That's what she told me. That's why she left 2 weeks before our wedding, to support her friend's new venture. But then, in the background of the video, I saw her, Sarah, and she wasn't alone. I almost dropped my phone. There she was, sitting in an open-air restaurant, leaning across the table, laughing. Not just with anyone, but with him, Nathan, my business partner, the man I had trusted for 10 years. The same guy Sarah used to call the ugliest guy in the office. The same guy she laughed at when he fumbled through conversations at office parties. Nathan, the one man I never in a million years would have suspected. And yet there they were, holding hands, whispering to each other, kissing, and all of it broadcasted live to the world. My hands trembled. My stomach twisted into a knot. The chat section was blowing up with comments. Wait, is that Sarah? Isn't she engaged? OMG, this is so awkward. Who's that dude she's with? I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. My mind couldn't process it. This couldn't be real. But it was. That's when I knew I had to act. But not yet. Not before I had all the proof. Not before I had a plan. And so I played along. I didn't call her. I didn't text her. I didn't even acknowledge what I saw. Instead, I called Marcus. Marcus was a private investigator recommended by my lawyer. The moment I explained my situation, he knew exactly what to do. We'll track them, he said. Social media leaves breadcrumbs. And I guarantee they've been sloppy. And they were. Marcus dug up everything. Hotel bookings. Flight records. Messages hidden in work emails. He even found out that the business trip wasn't just a getaway. It was a full-blown scheme. Sarah and Nathan weren't just having an affair. They were stealing from me. Nathan had been funneling company funds into fake invoices. And Sarah? She was in on it. I felt my blood boil. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. Couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my relationship with Sarah. Every, I love you. Every promise. Every shared dream. It all felt like a lie now. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. If they thought they could outsmart me, they were in for a rude awakening. I didn't cancel the wedding. Not yet. I let her think everything was normal. When she called, I played the part of the clueless fiancé. When she sent pictures, I responded with heart emojis. When she said, I miss you, I said it back. Meanwhile, I planned my next move. By the time Sarah flew home, everything was ready. The moment she stepped into our house, she was met with everyone. Her parents, my parents, our closest friends, my business partners, even Nathan's wife. Sarah's face lit up. She thought it was a surprise party. Babe, what's going on? She laughed. That's when I smiled and said, we're playing a little game called the honesty test. She laughed. Everyone laughed. Until the questions started. Sarah, I said, holding up my phone, have you ever cheated on me? She scoffed, rolling her eyes. Of course not. I tapped my screen. A picture from Amber's live stream popped up. The room went dead silent. Sarah went pale. That could be anyone. I didn't even flinch. Really? Because I have more. I pulled up my tablet and showed everyone the messages. Her texts to Nathan. The secret bank account transfers. The hotel receipts. Still think it wasn't you? I asked calmly. She stammered. I can explain. Great. I grinned. Then prove me wrong. I held up a final piece of evidence. Take off your sweater, I said. Her eyes widened in horror. What? Go ahead. Show everyone you don't have a tattoo of Nathan's name. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The entire room gasped. Then I turned to Nathan. You too, buddy. Show us your chest. Prove you don't have Sarah's name inked on you. Nathan looked like a deer in headlights. He refused. But his wife, she didn't. She pulled out bank statements, expensive gifts, evidence of his fraud. She also produced love letters, handwritten in Nathan's unmistakable scrawl. Letters detailing how he and Sarah had been planning this deception for years, carefully constructing their alibi, stealing from me, planning their escape together. The crowd murmured in shock. My father crossed his arms. My mother shook her head. Sarah's father looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. Her mother was sobbing. And then, Nathan's wife handed him divorce papers. Nathan slumped in his chair, defeated. Sarah covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. The weight of their lies had finally crushed them. By the time I was done, Sarah was in tears. Nathan was speechless. And I was finally free. I stood up, walked to the door, and turned back one last time. Sarah, I was going to buy you your dream house. I was going to give you everything. But now, you get nothing. With that, I walked out, and I never looked back. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Sarah tried calling, texting, even showing up at my workplace, begging for another chance. Nathan lost his job, his marriage, and his reputation. My business recovered, stronger than ever, while I moved forward, wiser, sharper, and completely free of the people who had betrayed me. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to humiliate them any further. They had done it to themselves. Justice? That was exactly what they got. The laughter faded as the game began in earnest. The first questions were lighthearted, small icebreakers to set the mood. Have you ever stolen a snack from the fridge? Someone laughed as they admitted to sneaking chocolates as a child. The fake lie detector app provided a harmless red screen that read, lie, and everyone chuckled. The relaxed atmosphere continued for a while, giving Sarah a false sense of security. Then someone, perhaps emboldened by the casual atmosphere, decided to push the boundary. Have you ever cheated on your husband? Sarah giggled and confidently answered, no. The room fell silent as the app flashed lie. A nervous chuckle escaped her lips, but no one else laughed. The weight of the moment hung in the air. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Well, I said, pulling out my phone. Let's check that. I tapped my screen, and the image from Amber's live stream appeared on the TV behind me. The angle was unmistakable. Sarah, sitting across from Nathan, holding his hand, laughing at some private joke. Then, as the stream progressed, Nathan leaned in and kissed her. Sarah's expression changed in an instant. Her hands trembled. Her lips parted slightly. That could be anyone, she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's wife scoffed. Oh, really? I didn't give Sarah a chance to spin more lies. I swiped to the next image, screenshots of their private messages, detailing their plans, their love, their betrayal. The text messages were damning. I can't wait to finally be free of him, Sarah had written. He's so clueless. I almost feel bad. Nathan's reply was just as incriminating. Once the money transfer is complete, we'll start fresh in Bali. Just you and me. The room erupted. Sarah's mother gasped, clutching at her chest, while her father turned an alarming shade of red. My mother shook her head in disgust. My father sat stiffly, fists clenched on his lap. Nathan had turned pale, glancing nervously at his wife. She had something for him, 2 bank statements. You think you're so clever, Nathan? She spat. You thought I wouldn't notice your little extra withdrawals? His jaw tightened. I can explain. No need, I interrupted. I have plenty of explanations right here. I held up another piece of evidence, a hotel receipt. 1 room, 2 occupants. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every eye was locked on Sarah and Nathan as I revealed piece after piece of their deception. Then Sarah made a fatal mistake. Instead of apologizing, she scoffed. This is ridiculous. Everyone has private conversations. You're blowing this out of proportion. A collective murmur spread through the room. Sarah's best friend, Gina, stepped forward. Are you serious right now, Sarah? You were planning to leave him. You were stealing from him. Sarah's face contorted in frustration. I was not stealing. Nathan's wife cut her off. Enough. Don't you dare try to justify this. She stood and walked to him, slapping divorce papers down on the table. We're done, she hissed. Sarah's father finally spoke up, his voice dangerously low. Get out, Sarah. Her head snapped towards him, eyes widening. Dad. Now. The finality in his voice was undeniable. Sarah collapsed into the chair, sobbing. She knew there was no way out. I exhaled, feeling the weight of months of betrayal finally lift off my shoulders. But the night was far from over. Just as I thought we had reached the climax, another voice spoke up. It was one of my colleagues from work, James, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. There's something else, he said, glancing at me with hesitation. I frowned. What do you mean? He pulled out his phone. Nathan wasn't just stealing from you. He tried to involve me too. Gasps filled the room as he scrolled through his messages, finally turning the screen toward me. There it was, conversations between Nathan and James, where Nathan had attempted to convince him to manipulate financial reports to cover the missing funds. Nathan buried his face in his hands. This is ridiculous, he muttered. You people are all against me. His wife let out a bitter laugh.
No, Nathan.
You did this to yourself. Sarah wiped her tear-streaked face and turned to me with desperation. Please, let's talk privately. We can work this out. I scoffed. Work this out. I gestured to the audience of stunned family and friends. You lied, you cheated, you stole, and you expected me to just forgive and forget? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Sarah, you made your choice. Now live with it. Nathan stood abruptly. I don't have to sit here and take this. We're leaving. But before he could move, my lawyer, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. Actually, you're not going anywhere. He held up a thick manila envelope. Nathan, Sarah, both of you are looking at fraud charges. I strongly suggest you sit down. Nathan paled, his bravado vanishing in an instant. Sarah clutched at his arm, her breath coming in rapid gasps. Fraud? She whispered. My lawyer nodded. The evidence is overwhelming. The missing funds, the fake invoices, the transactions. It's all here. Sarah let out a choked sob. No, this can't be happening. I folded my arms, staring at the two of them. It is, and it's far from over. Sarah's father shook his head. I can't believe I raised you to be this kind of person. His voice broke, and for the first time that night, true shame flickered in Sarah's eyes. Nathan's wife stepped forward, her tone resolute. I hope you both rot for what you've done. Silence filled the room as I turned to my guests. Thank you all for being here tonight, I said, my voice steady. The truth needed to come out. One by one, people stood and began to leave. As Sarah and Nathan sat in stunned silence, I picked up the divorce papers I had prepared long ago and placed them in front of her. Sign them, I said simply. She reached for the pen with trembling fingers. The night had finally reached its end. The silence in the room stretched, thick with tension. Someone in the crowd, perhaps a friend trying to defend Sarah, cleared their throat and said, That's not enough evidence for a scandal like this. I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. All right, I said, my voice even. Let me tell you what happened at the company party. Sarah flinched as the room's attention snapped back to her. A few weeks ago, we had a corporate party. Nothing fancy, just a casual event with drinks and music. One of our mutual friends, Eric, had a little too much to drink. And do you know what happens when people drink? They talk. Eric, sitting across the room, turned pale. He looked at Sarah and then at Nathan before lowering his head. He knew what was coming. Eric sang like a canary that night. I continued, watching Sarah's face carefully. He confessed that he had known about the affair for a long time but had kept quiet. But when I pressed him for details, he let something slip. He admitted that Sarah and Nathan had been meeting once a week, like clockwork. And that's not all. Sarah opened her mouth, but I held up a hand to silence her. Eric also said that Nathan had stolen money from my company multiple times. The room erupted in murmurs. Sarah's father shot her a sharp look, his disappointment evident. Nathan's wife, standing stiffly with her arms crossed, glared at her husband. Sarah finally found her voice. "It's not true. Eric was drunk. He doesn't know what he's saying." I smiled, a slow and deliberate motion. "Okay, if I'm wrong, show everyone that you don't have Nathan's name tattooed on your body." A thick silence followed. Eyes darted between Sarah and Nathan. Sarah hesitated, her face draining of color. Her arms instinctively wrapped around herself. The room collectively held its breath. Then, she refused. Gasps echoed around us. My mother whispered something under her breath, shaking her head in dismay. I turned my gaze toward Nathan. "Show everyone that you don't have Sarah's name tattooed on your body." Nathan swallowed hard. He shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Again he refused. And then the final blow came, not from me, but from Nathan's wife. She stepped forward, her voice ice-cold. "That's why Sarah always came to our house pretending to love our children," she spat. "It was never about our kids, was it, Nathan? It was about sneaking around." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a stack of papers. I had my suspicions, so I started keeping track of our finances. I found bank statements, expensive purchases from Asia, jewelry that I never received. She glared at Sarah. But guess who did receive them? All eyes turned to Sarah. She shrank back into her seat. I stepped forward, driving the final nail in the coffin. Nathan wasn't just sleeping with Sarah. He was trying to rob my company. Sarah's voice broke. "No, you're twisting things." I met her gaze with an icy stare. "If you don't like it, we'll settle this in court." She burst into tears. I wasn't done yet. "And finally, here's the last piece of evidence." Just as Sarah looked like she was about to collapse under the weight of her lies, another voice spoke up. It was Jacob, one of my senior accountants. "That's not all," he said, stepping forward. I turned to him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Jacob pulled out his phone. "We had some discrepancies in the accounts, and I started looking deeper. Nathan wasn't just stealing money. He was forging invoices under Sarah's name. She was complicit." Sarah shot up from her seat. "That's a lie." Jacob remained unfazed, scrolling through his phone. "Then explain these transactions. Wire transfers to a hidden account in Thailand, signed off with Sarah's approval." Nathan's face turned ashen. Sarah clenched her fists but said nothing. Nathan's wife stepped forward again. "I checked his emails. He was planning to run. Without you, Sarah. He was withdrawing money from that account and transferring it to a personal fund under his brother's name." Sarah's eyes widened. "No, that can't be." She turned to Nathan in horror. "You wouldn't do that to me." Nathan avoided her gaze. The truth was out, and he had nothing left to say. I smirked. "Looks like you were getting played too, Sarah." Sarah sank into her chair, shaking her head in disbelief. "I thought we were in this together." Nathan scoffed. "You were just a useful pawn." The room collectively gasped. Sarah looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Please, we can work something out. I made a mistake." I shook my head.
No, Sarah.
"You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice." She started sobbing again, but the sympathy she might have once received was gone. Even her own parents had turned their backs on her. Nathan's wife stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I took a deep breath, looking at the faces around me. "I think we're done here." Sarah slumped forward, defeated. Nathan remained silent, knowing his fate was sealed. I walked to the door, picking up the divorce papers I had prepared and setting them in front of Sarah. "Sign them. We're done." She hesitated, then, with trembling hands, picked up the pen. It was over. The room remained frozen in silence. Then, Nathan's wife shattered it. "That's why Sarah always came to our house pretending to love our children," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "It wasn't about family, was it? It was about sneaking around behind our backs." She pulled out a stack of bank statements and tossed them onto the table. The pages fluttered open, revealing the truth. Expensive purchases from Asia, luxurious gifts, and jewelry that she had never received. Sarah instinctively clutched at her ears, as if she could hide the diamond earrings now gleaming under the chandelier's light. "So that's where my money went," Nathan's wife continued, her voice filled with bitterness. "Tell me, Sarah, do they look good on you?" Sarah had no answer. She shrank into herself, staring at the evidence laid bare before everyone. I wasn't finished. With a steady hand, I pulled out another set of documents. Proof that Nathan had been siphoning funds from my company. "Nathan didn't just betray his wife," I said coldly. "He betrayed me. He used fake invoices, shell accounts, and company resources for his personal expenses. And Sarah, you were right there helping him." Sarah bolted upright. "That's a lie. I had no idea." I arched an eyebrow. "Really? Then explain these sign transfers. Your signature is right here." I slid the documents across the table. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. She turned to Nathan, eyes pleading. "You said you took care of everything." Nathan didn't meet her gaze. He was sweating now, his hands clenched on the table. "Oh, he took care of it all right," I continued. "Including your little getaway plan." I reached for my final set of evidence. A travel itinerary, fake identities, and offshore bank details. "You two weren't just having an affair. You were planning to run away together, using my company's stolen money to fund your new lives abroad." Sarah's breathing became erratic. No, that's not true." I tapped my phone, and the final nail in the coffin played on the TV screen. A voice recording. Nathan's voice, clear as day. "As soon as we get the last transfer, we'll disappear. He won't even know what hit him." Sarah let out a broken sob. Nathan shot to his feet. "This is entrapment. You can't do this." I smirked. "Actually, I can. And I already have." Sarah turned to me, desperation in her eyes. "Please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I love you." I stared at her, my voice devoid of warmth. "You loved the life I gave you. You loved the security, the wealth, the dreams I built for us. But you never loved me." She sobbed harder. "But what about the house? Our future?" I shook my head. "You lost everything. No home, no family, no support. All because you chose greed over loyalty." Nathan's wife stepped forward, slamming divorce papers in front of him. "Sign them." Nathan's face twisted in rage, but he knew he was beaten. He grabbed the pen and scrawled his name. I turned to Sarah. "And you? Here's your settlement, nothing. You get nothing." Sarah crumbled, her sobs echoing through the room. Nathan looked at me, hatred in his eyes. "You think you've won?" I leaned in, my voice calm. "I know I have, because I still have my dignity. You have nothing." Then, I pulled out the final document, Nathan's termination letter. "You're fired."